Um, but as I was sitting and listening to your presentation, this is what I was thinking about, and this is the first question. And it kind of goes back to the representative from Lamar High School, 3,200 kids. And then I started to think about HISD, 200,000 kids. And I started to think about the structure of the traditional school district. And here's the question. Do you think traditional school districts are going to be able to make the leap to becoming next generation school districts? And if so, how are they going to do it? And if not, why not?
Well,
and good morning, Tom.
So I would say they have to. The interesting thing about all the stuff that I talked about, there's not, at least in my mind, there's not a question of if, there's just the question of when. This is not, what I'm describing is not like NCLB, right? The No Child Left Behind, that the federal law that the House just passed a new version. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But this isn't a set of policies that somebody in Washington, D.C. made up. This is a set of fundamental technologies that are changing the opportunity set for us as human beings. And our schools are just being enveloped by these new opportunities. So this is, to some extent, inevitable. Schools will have to find the best way for them to incorporate the technology. It's obvious that some are moving more rapidly than others. From a structural standpoint, I'm worried about the fact that we've locked in a place-based governance system in what is becoming an anywhere, anytime learning opportunity set. So most of our kids are learning from many different apps and number of different teachers, maybe even different providers on the same day. And when you sort of project that forward, anywhere, anytime learning, it feels somewhat orthogonal to this idea of a boundary, a school district that has attendance boundaries, and you're supposed to go to the school in your district.
Well, you know, the other thing I was thinking about was like time.
Yeah.
Right? Not only boundaries, but, okay, so we're going to start school. We're going to start school August 24th.
Right.
And we're going to end school
at 7:45.
Yeah, and at 7:45.
And those are becoming increasingly arbitrary.
Yeah.
Right? So it'll take longer than it should for us to fully incorporate this, but I mean that's why I think new school creation is so important.
Yeah.
That's why I think UP is, if you haven't been to UP, you really need to go, because it'll blow you away. It'll help create this series of pictures of what might be possible. And that's why I think we all need more visual images of what learning can look like, and over time, that'll be incorporated into our public policy. So I do have the sense that this is inevitable.
Yeah.
It is.
Do you think
The fact that parents, teachers, and kids can find stuff and put it to use tomorrow is changing things, and it is making progress more rapid than most people think. So the bureaucracy is taking a while to catch up, but the revolution's on. I mean, right? The parents and kids and teachers are out there doing cool stuff, and that leads me to think that we'll catch up.
And so do you think there's a possibility, because I think about this a lot, that some schools and school districts that cannot make this jump are going to become extinct? They're going to be judged irrelevant by, let's say, parents and community. You're not moving fast enough in this direction. Therefore, I'm going to choose not to choose you.
So that's happening.
Yeah.
So here's the difficult thing. I spent a couple hours on the El Paso budget on Friday. El Paso, like a lot of communities, we're seeing the growth slow down a little bit, so their enrollment is slowly going down. And as a superintendent, I know how awful it is to manage down the enrollment curve. And when your enrollment is starting to decline, and it might be from a variety of new sources of education competition, it's very difficult to get out in front of that. And so it has the tendency to make you even more defensive about new opportunities in the community. And so we will find some districts that get into this really negative spiral, negative in terms of enrollment declines and negative in terms of their response to the new opportunity set. So I do worry about that. But the general arc of public policy, I believe, has to be towards funding that is weighted and flexible and portable and increasingly follows young people to the best learning opportunity for them.
Right, right.
That's that, and the shift to competency-based learning where kids move at their own pace, those two things are probably a generational shift. It's a 20-year kind of an arc, not a 2 or 3 year shift.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to lose the workforce piece.
Let
me put this into a question to kind of tee it up for you. Do you think there is, so the last part of my career when I was in the public school system, it was always termed college and career readiness. Do you think the country is in a place that we're running the risk of now having a conversation around college or career readiness?
I don't think so. But for me, college readiness has always been one simple important thing. It means that you can go to a community college and earn credit, right? That you don't need remediation, that you can at least earn English and math credits because your high school opportunity prepared you for that. So I think that's a bar that we have to maintain for every student. But the thing that, a couple things have happened recently. One is that return on investment in traditional higher ed has plummeted. Costs have gone up, state reimbursement rates to those institutions has gone down, tuition rates have gone up, youth unemployment has been stagnant since the Great Recession. You put those all together and the return on investment is bad, and the student debt is going up, and simultaneously all these really interesting new options have been created. And the need for lifelong learning continues to become very evident in most careers. So when you put that all together, it says to me, there's a bunch of really new interesting pathways. So I met this kid in Ohio a couple weeks ago. I talked about him last night, Scott. I met him at a career center, Marion, Ohio, little town northeast of Columbus. Scott is one of the 7 teenagers on the planet that's certified by the 2 leading robotics manufacturers. He works for Honda. He makes about $35 an hour training adults. Honda's going to pay for his college. And this kid will graduate from college with 100 grand in his pocket instead of 100 grand of debt. So think about his good fortune of stumbling into this career center that happened to make the shift faster than community colleges who don't really want to give a certification with a manufacturer's name on it.
Right.
And they said, well, this is what the manufacturers want, so we're going to offer a certification. So this kid is now on a very lucrative pathway. He's definitely not locked into a specific trade. He will be able to do anything he wants because he now has free college in front of him, and he's on this interesting work and learn ladder. And I think there are a lot of jobs, there are emerging number of jobs in this sort of work and learn ladder that to me are sort of helping me rethink post-secondary, not as a decision, a place to go for 4 or 5 years and then work until you're 65, but instead pathways where you work and learn simultaneously. And so that suggests to me that HB 5 in Texas was largely on the right path, that we ought to be having the advisor I think every student ought to get in middle school, ought to be having a conversation with the family about what's the kid interested in, how are you thinking about college. Let's make sure that you're taking the right courses in 8th and 9th grade so that you're doing college level work in your upper division, so that like at Quest in Humboldt, 80% of you can leave with an associate degree when you graduate from high school. That's a conversation we ought to be having with every 8th grade family, so that we're setting them up for the best possible upper division transition into college and careers.
Mm-hmm. Let's take some questions from the crowd. Donna. Kat's coming with the microphone.
Thank you. I'd like to address a disconnect that I see. I'm a teacher educator who believes very strongly in what you mentioned about collaboration and building relationships, but I'm also a parent of 2 middle schoolers who sees, well, just an example from last week, my children spent all week taking district level assessments.
Yeah.
And teachers seem to have very little voice and control in how that happens. So in that transition, how do we hold systems accountable for being personalized rather than standardized?
It's a good question. I'm gonna avoid that question by making an observation. So the good news is that we're at the beginning of the end of standardized testing as we know it.
But you know what? If you would visit, like, we talked about this in the office, in a state that has, I think, promised its citizens, we're going to back off of testing.
Yeah.
There is more test prep going on this year than I think we have ever seen.
No, and I get that. And I mentioned El Paso, where the management team's in jail for running this test prep, cheating, embezzlement scheme. Yeah. So that's sort of the worst example of it in America. But so the good news is the arc of history is heading in a. I know you're frowning. It's like you don't want to hear about the arc of history. But listen, the good news is that kids at UP, their learning coach knows exactly how they're doing in every subject every day, and so for them, the thought of taking a week off to take a test at the end of the year or to take a couple days off to take a test is ridiculous, right? But there's a couple technical problems that we need to address. One is that despite the fact that most kids and most schools are benefiting from this flood of formative assessment, the feedback from all the apps that they're in all day long, while kids are benefiting from that, most of that stuff doesn't fit together very well. So we need what I call super grade books that automatically suck that data in and combine it and then surface it to students, teachers, and parents in these really simple data visualizations that answer the question, how's my kid doing, right? And things aren't quite there yet. So I think when we get better at combining formative assessment and where there's a larger number of schools that can answer in a consistent way how are kids doing, it will become more and more apparent that it's ridiculous to take a week off to test kids at the end of the year. So I'm confident that in the long run, this is going away. In the short run, what is also clear is that America called BS on week-long summative tests last year. I mean, I think policymakers heard that loud and clear. And so you'll see in the short run some scaling back. I think it will take districts a few years to, who just, listen, we just went through we just went through sort of 10 years of just figuring out how managed instruction works.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Managed instruction is this, program where districts have pacing guides and benchmark assessments, and everybody does the same thing at the same pace, and you testing. Or we just figured out how to do that, and now we're sort of letting go of that and trying to figure out how to do personalized learning. So we're in a transition. It's going to take a couple years, but relatively quickly, most schools will be able to replace that stop learning and do testing with testing that happens in the background, right? Where there are assessments that are embedded in the learning experience, and that from that we'll get really the sort of rich dashboards that kids at Summit get. So we're getting there, but there are some technical and political barriers in front of us. But I think 2 years from now, things are going to be a lot better than they are. Texas
You think
also,
it's going to happen that fast?
I'm
You
usually-
know
I'm
why I
usually-
don't think it's gonna
I'm
happen?
usually directionally right, but I can be wrong by a decade or so.
You know why I asked that? Because, so I'll just tell a quick story. So we're doing some work around Readers Writers Workshop
Yep.
with some English teachers. And we said, hey, you need to get your kids to start reading books. I can't do that. Why not? Well, they have to read passages because they have to get ready for the test. So I hope it's 2 years. But what I think of is we have programmed teachers, at least in this state, the last 30 years
We have.
to behave this way.
I get that, but what we're trying to do in El Paso, we developed a new vision called active learning, and we are trying the superintendent is trying very hard to help that community leave a decade of mind-numbing test prep in the dust, and to create a vision for high engagement, active learning. And so I deeply appreciate that sort of leadership. I will admit that he's worried about whether they take a test score hit, and whether he has the political capital, given the fact that the school board's going to flip from managers to the electeds in May, and it may be a test of the political capital that he's developed. But I think there's enough parents that are sick of this brain dead stuff that we've passed off as education for a decade. And I think we can, as you've heard me say, I know we can create rigorous environments that also pay attention to equity. Right. So I'm very pro measurement. Don't get me wrong. I think measurement is critical to equity. If we take equitable outcomes at all seriously, we need to know how every kid is doing in every subject every day, and make sure that we are creating the supports and learning experiences that help kids be successful. And measurement is central to that. But that whole standardized testing thing is from that information scarcity age that really ended a decade ago, right? And
hi, with all of these opportunities for digital learning, you mentioned career or college readiness.
Yeah.
Is there a space in there for developing entrepreneurship?
yeah,
Before, it could overlap both.
yeah.
It could be its own separate entity, or it could be one or the other.
Yeah, so when I talk about that maker mindset, I'm really talking about an entrepreneurial mindset. We need to prepare every kid to run their own business. So if I'm talking to 8th and 9th graders, I'm telling them, you will at some point in your career work for yourself, whether you want to or not. You're going to have a series of jobs, and some of those jobs are going to be freelance jobs, where you're picking up an odd job here and an odd job there. Some of you, like me, may turn that into a career, but you will spend some time as an entrepreneur making a job, not getting a job. And so that is a combination of a mindset and a set of skills that prepares kids for that future. So I think that's super important. And then sort of on top of that, I just wrote a blog that said on Sunday, my last good work post was the two most important things we can teach our kids are marketing and project management, right? The how to get work and how to do work. Those are two really critical skills, whether you go to work for, for Chevron, where we were last night, or whether you hang out a shingle and mow lawns for a living. Those two skills are super critical, and kids at UP are learning those skills. So,
Well, and I think the reason why kids at UP are using those skills, it goes back to what I talked about earlier around the imperatives. Those kids are around careers their entire day. So one of the things that like we're kind of questioning is, so does it make sense to put an 11-year-old around 2,000 other 11-year-olds? Or does it make better sense to expose 11-year-olds to jobs and work?
Yeah, I'm in the latter camp.
Yeah.
There's a school called Tacoma School of the Arts. Did you guys see that?
No.
So it's on Main Street in Tacoma, and they partner with the Natural History Museum, the Glass Museum, the Art Museum, the Theater District, the University of Washington, Tacoma. They have 15 different campuses that are on this trolley line, so kids hop on and off this trolley and are dropping in and out of all these different facilities. This sort of school as community is really awesome. And then Kat and I were talking about last night, what you'll need is sort of a badging system where these community partners can help. It's like a merit badge system, right? Just like scouting, where a kid can show up at a museum and say, look, I'm working on this badge, can you help me with this? And these community mentors can assist in learning and then demonstrating their learning. So I think that's going to open things up to have a lot of community partners contribute to student learning.
Catherine?
So you've spoken about equity quite a bit, and I'm looking at this young lady from Nairobi here in front of me, and I'm interested in hearing you speak about just these issues of equity, specifically around race, ability, ethnicity, and diversity within the school system. I think we're really starting to talk about that more. What do you think needs to be done? What do you think is really being done as far as diversity of the teaching force and looking at student discipline? That's a really important issue that we're facing right now as well.
Thank you. There's like a book-length answer to that you'd probably be better versed at writing than me, but let me mention a couple things that are important to me. One is we need a better way to fund education, and programs in schools should receive weighted, flexible, portable funding. Weighted means relevant to the challenge. So students ought to receive funding based on the challenges that they bring to school. That ought to create incentives for educators to work with most challenging populations instead of what in most states is the opposite incentive, is not to work with them. So schools that serve highly challenged populations ought to receive more money. We live in segregated communities, and that's a really difficult issue. We've seen cities like Seattle and Wake County in North Carolina move away from busing and thoughtful constructs to better segregate schools. And in many ways, I find that unfortunate. I think we can do some of that with programs of choice. But the key with schools of choice is for community leaders to ask a simple question: who has access to what program? To do a census by sub-zip code and say, what learning programs do those kids have transported access to? Right? Because it's not just access, it's transported access. Because if you can't get there, it's not really an option for a low-income family. So there's a new term called harbor masters. These are people that take ownership for educational opportunities in a city, and I think harbor masters and superintendents need to do that sort of analysis, and to look at the array of options. And what happens in most cities is that affluent kids have much better, much richer learning opportunities, and low-income families don't have the same kind of options. And so I think city leaders need to be really intentional about what programs exist where and who gets access to those programs, and then how those programs are funded based on the kids that actually are enrolled.
We have time for 2 more questions, and this is the first.
Hi, excuse me, hi. So I was born in Kenya and I live in Houston now, and given the economy and the population of Houston, can you address the English language learners and how they would benefit from this? Because, and I'm sure you've come up with this in the school in Nairobi, not everybody showed up learning, knowing English.
Right.
How do we address the English language learners in this whole revolution?
It's getting more and more challenging. The district where I was superintendent, we were about 15% ELL when I was there, and it's probably 40% now. 110 languages spoken, and so super complicated demographic, much higher levels of poverty than Seattle. So it's one of those interesting urban phenomenon where it's so expensive to live in Seattle, it's pushed low-income families out into what were suburbs. So this is an American challenge. There's sort of a unique version of it in Houston. I am excited about some of the new tools that we see to promote language acquisition. I would say they've not progressed as rapidly as in mathematics, which is, it's easier to code, it's easier to build sort of game-based learning. But at the secondary level, we're seeing rapid adoption of Achieve 3000 and Read 180, these blended learning programs that combine adaptive learning, leveled reading, and small group instruction. So sort of a station rotation blend seems to be quite useful in an ELL environment. And then the flip side of it is the world language opportunity. We just wrote a paper called Elevate and Empower about how world language teachers are becoming leaders in their school, demonstrating the benefits of blended and competency-based learning. So now it's possible to offer at least the top 6 world languages in every school. And there's no reason that a district doesn't have good K-12 exposure to and then competency requirements for several world languages. I think most districts can afford to have an on-site teacher for 2 of those and can offer several online. So I think that's online learning is another benefit for world language acquisition.
We have one more question. One more question.
Hi, I'm with Texas Southern University Educator Prep Program, and our students are here today. And from you visiting the schools, what do you think may be the greatest strength that the students can bring to the class for digital learning, or the weaknesses that you see in new teachers as you visited campuses?
So is the question about teachers or students?
Teachers.
So what do teachers need to know and be able to do, or help me?
Okay, what do you think would be the biggest strength that they could bring to the classroom when you were coming? I know you talked about mindset.
The biggest strength that like a new teacher could bring to the classroom? Mindset. It's that innovation mindset. So the willingness to try. If you want to see an experience as good an example as I have seen this year in the dozens of schools that I've been in, go visit Cecilia Benoit at
Sicily, Benoit.
Sicily.
Yeah.
Man, she is a remarkable human being. She was a literacy teacher in HISD, then a lit coach, and then was a coach for you guys. So she's obviously a skilled professional, but what I most enjoyed about spending an hour with her yesterday was her openness to trying new things. and the way she was incorporating some really old practices, her composition books, and a set of new tools that, like Edmodo, within which she had an individualized curriculum for every single student. So just the flexibility that she brought to her work, the obvious joy and passion that she attacked her challenges with. So that openness, that disposition would definitely be number one.
And you know what's funny about that, Tom? And we're going to have to wrap up. But as we've talked about what the next steps are, and we're going to talk about this more today, for A+ Up, what the next steps are, we've actually been told by people, you know, A+ Up is not scalable.
It's
Because you can't find Cicely Benoit's.
I think there's a lot.
Do you agree with that?
No, that's BS, because we're trapping a lot of really great teachers in really crappy schools, right?
Yeah.
Just the construct that we've created, the facilities that we've created that trap them in a 900 square foot room.
Yeah.
And then this construct of standards assessment, there's a lot of really extraordinary educators that, given half the chance that she's had, can and will create really powerful learning experiences for kids. So I'm super optimistic about that. And that's why this whole next gen thing is such a big deal, that if you give your teachers a chance to co-construct environments and experiences for young people, I'm very, very optimistic that they can create the kind of environment we saw yesterday. And the cool thing about that environment, it's not only super motivating for kids, it's a much better place to work as an educator.
Yeah. I knew I liked you.
You know what? Things are heading in the right direction. And on one hand, I want to say be patient, but on the other hand, don't be patient. You should complain when stuff isn't the way it's supposed to be. When you don't see powerful learning happening for kids, you should complain, because things aren't the way they should be. When you see teachers working in conditions that are not attractive and not supportive and not conducive to professional growth, you ought to complain about those, because that's not the way things are supposed to be, right? When low-income kids don't have a whole bunch of really great options, that's not the way things are supposed to be, and we can do better.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Vander Ark. So this is the third in the 2014-2015 speaker series. Our fourth speaker is a great follow-up to Tom. It'll be Andy Calkins from Next Generation Learning. And I think Andy will be able to tactically talk about some things that Tom has talked about strategically.
He's really great, and he's had the chance to work with 50 or 60 mostly high schools, but also with dozens of post-secondary environments. So he, at an intimate level of detail, knows as much about the sort of next generation opportunity set as anybody.
And I think that's April 7th, right, Kat?
Yes.
April 7th, public lecture here. Make sure you sign up.
10th.
April 10th. I was wrong. April 10th. Sign up for the lecture here. Want to thank Chevron, Museum of Fine Arts, A+ Board of Trustees, and most of all of you for participating in this public lecture. Thanks. Everybody have a good day.